So today we are beginning a new enterprise, actually building off work that we've done over the last few years of a number of interviews and recordings, but also building off of White Nine, a marvelous little documentary that was produced by Bill Martin, once my rehabilitation counselor, who came to work with me at Stavros. And Bill, a couple of years ago, came back with a group of documentary filmmakers and set up here in our living room and interviewed me and Joe Tringali and Charlie Carr, two gentlemen. I'll call them gentlemen. They've been called other things. But two guys who I met at Mass General Hospital in the summer of 1968. And then a few years later, actually around 1974, Bill joined us in the early days of establishing independent living programs here in Massachusetts. And Bill has gone on to a very successful career in business and has a great love of theater and playwriting, and brought in some people. He had done some filming of plays that he had produced, and they were our documentarians.
I think they did a wonderful job. And I also thought it was interesting when he called you the philosopher.
Well, they had to. That was, I believe, Nilu, the director, and they were trying to put a handle on each of us. So I was the philosopher. Charlie Carr was the organizer. Joe was the doer. And Bill got a little strained there. Bill was the catalyst. What did that mean? Finally figured it out. And it's around an incident that's there in the film, which is that although I did not tell the whole story, but Bill and I had gone out drinking one night. We were drinking buddies. He was my rehab counselor. And Bill was 3 or 4 sheets to the wind that night. And he was depressed. And at the end of the evening, back at my apartment, he was sitting on the floor and he's feeling terrible about his work. And he's going, oh my God, the Rehabilitation Commission, what a dysfunctional proposition it is. And if guys like you don't get off your fucking ass, nothing's going to change. At which point I said, okay, Bill, why don't you sober up? We'll get together for brunch tomorrow. And that next day we got together for brunch and made the decision that we would take a flyer. There was a little bit of end-of-the-year money available around doing special projects. And that was the first public money that we brought into the little nonprofit Stavros and Stavros Foundation that evolved into Stavros Center for Independent Living. That's how it began. So in that sense, I thought, yeah, Bill was the catalyst. And he was the one who changed me from my initial airheaded impulse that we were going to do some things like assisted yoga in a heated saltwater suspension tank. I had had my time at Esalen in Big Sur and had thought advanced body work would be a really wonderful thing. And it really was something that would have been tremendous to bring into the field of medical rehabilitation. But it wasn't the top priority. Mm-hmm. You know, we had people still isolated, stuck in nursing homes, stuck in bad bedrooms. So something much more basic was needed. And we jumped into that, well, I could say we jumped into a deep pool, but actually the image, the metaphor that's always made sense to me, there was a wave of energy building. It's like it's a surfing wave is building. And what we did was drop into the critical water. And we let that energy take us. And I think the thing was, We weren't completely the authors or in any sense visionaries. What we were willing to do was ride the wave and make some good choices, to do things in the way we needed to do them. Occasionally disrespectfully when bureaucracy needed disrespect, and at other times respectfully and collaboratively. But it's the disability movement was just really breaking out in the early 1970s around the country. Notably, it had become visible out in the Bay Area of California. And then we here in Massachusetts. Somebody once described Amherst as Berkeley East. Mm-hmm. I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. Having been to Berkeley, Amherst is a marvelous place, but it ain't no Berkeley. I had spent some time and had connected with some of the crowd from Berkeley, especially Judy Heumann. Mm. And I had this connection and really connected with this California energy. And there were probably times when I even had thoughts of possibly moving to California, but no, much better visit once a year, which I tried to do during the winter, get a little break from Massachusetts, but see how this new movement of empowerment, people with disabilities into active, empowered, creative roles, that part of the disability movement could manifest here in Massachusetts.
So, Chris, what was this film, once again, that Bill Martin produced?
White Nine.
Okay, so where...
And that title comes from the name of the rehabilitation unit at Mass General Hospital. It was on the 9th floor of the White Building at Mass General Hospital. So, White Nine.
Is it still there?
It's still, well, the White Building is still there. It's no longer a rehabilitation unit there. But we did show the film, have a screening of the film. They have a museum on the grounds, the campus of the Mass General Hospital. And we did that a little over a year ago. And we screened the film literally in the shadow of the White Building. And one of the things, as you saw in the film, was that that brother Joe Tringali wrote a poem, and it was about White Nine. Mm. But as a place of Joe, of the three of us, that is the three of us, all of whom have spinal cord injuries. Joe was the one who did not romanticize or idealize this idea of having this movement, all this purposeful stuff that it somehow was going to outbalance what he would describe the hell of going through the experience of disability. So Joe put that in his poem, and it became one of the centerpieces of the film.
That's actually, you bring up an interesting point, because on the one hand, there's the shame as a culture that we used to feel around any kind of perceived deformity. If you are less than perfect, we don't want to see you. And people that were disabled were kept away. And there's a stigma associated with how we feel when we see someone that doesn't look right. Like, oh, I shouldn't feel horrified by somebody that looks like something horrible happened to them. Something horrible did happen. But then what's the greater meaning outside of that? I mean, where do you go from there? How do you move forward? Because you can't undo something if you have it. You can't go back to not being paralyzed.
I guess not.
So
what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Oh, there's my squeaky noise. That's the one I will try to avoid.
That's a good. You sample it, and then you get the hip hop masters to use it. But so it's interesting being like tough about it. Like, no, we're not going to be Pollyanna. We're not going to like pretend that, oh, we got this kumbaya. It's all unicorns. But you still have to have that vision of something that's worth working towards. So it's kind of interesting, the balance, like being yes, this sucks, man.
It really sucks. Yeah. It was excruciating. It was really hard. And then there were so many redeeming moments within it. And there were adventures within it. The adventure of being conscious through 4 hours of surgery in the strangest drug space I was ever in. I mean, forget the psychedelic adventures of the 60s. For me to have a memory of the scalpel filleting the back of my neck. I can remember the pressure of the scalpel. I do not remember any pain. What was that drug that they were giving me? But yeah, 4 hours of conscious surgery there.
Wow.
And not the only one. My favorite of all time was reciting the opening stanza of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock
Oh my God.
on an operating table when I was having emergency surgery. Can I give you that whole story?
Yes,
Oh,
please.
God, it's
We
such a
have,
favorite.
yes.
And it actually goes back to in the summer of 1965 was my last summer working with my brother, the summer before, before he died. And we were working on the maintenance crew at Hancock Village, which was 500 to 700 garden type apartments out on the West Roxbury. Was it West Roxbury? Off the VFW Parkway, West Roxbury in Boston. And we had worked there for a couple of summers. And that summer, there was a water crisis in Boston. It was actually the period of the worst water shortage in the history of the Northeast.
They were talking about diverting the Connecticut River back then.
Now, I was trying to recover this memory of this precious memory, my last summer with my brother, and I kept thinking, I don't ever remember it raining. And I looked it up, and sure enough, a drought had begun, actually shortly after Kennedy's death. And we can do all the kind of poetic, that there were no more tears left to fall.
Right.
But that drought lasted until 1969. But that summer of 65 was the worst of it. And we never did get our boots wet that summer. So my brother and I are working, we were digging ditches. We were digging up old rusted water pipes, and they were being placed with new copper lines, anything to save water. And we were digging ditches that were about 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep, pulling up the old lines, putting new ones in, tamping in this carbon powder that would penetrate our skin, Wonderful, filthy work. Actually with, we described our crew as 4 Greeks and a Jew. Only the Jew was already an honorary Greek. That was Kenny Rosenthal. And the only time we got our boots wet that summer was when Kenny, who was graceful on a football field, but a disaster in other circumstances, with a pickaxe split a water line. Just as the foreman of the crew, George, is yelling up the hill, "Now, Kenny, watch out for..." And Kenny cuts the line, high pressure water. That was the only time we got our boots wet. So that summer, amongst other things, I would always have a book in my back pocket. And it was one of two. I was reading Paul Tillich's The Courage to Be.
Okay, I'm not actually familiar with that.
The great German theologian, Paul Tillich, existential Lutheran pastor, driven out by the Nazis. He came to, initially to Union Theological Seminary. And by the time I was reading that book in '65, he was a university professor at Harvard, distinguished theologian, very deep, very Germanic stuff. I had no idea what it was, but somehow it appealed to me. The other book that I had was T.S. Eliot's collected poems.
Oh,
And there I was memorizing chunks of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock.
right.
So those books took me in two directions. One is Paul Tillich took me into an advanced religion seminar at Wesleyan, taught by John David McGuire, who became my great mentor, a theologian, freedom writer, advisor to Dr. King, first president of the King Center in Atlanta after Martin's assassination, and a man who set many directions for me. He was the man, amongst other things, when I broke my neck and was paralyzed on the wrestling mat. When the trainer came up, straightened me up, and I heard him quietly say to the coach, broken neck. Not that I could sort that information out. I said to the trainer, get John McGuire. Because John, who had become advisor and mentor, I wanted him to be the one to call my mother. To have him be the one to tell her that I was grievously injured.
Your poor mom. She went through so much in such a short time.
My brother died a year before.
Chris went through so much in such a short time.
Yes, Chris did go through.
Yeah.
He had to continue living with it after.
I went through it, my mom went through it. So, we had that piece. That's one of the books I had in my back pocket, was Paul Tillich. It was on the reading list for John McGuire's seminar, Contending Approaches to Contemporary Protestant Theology.
Oh,
That's what took me into meeting John McGuire. The other book, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, is one of the poems in the Wasteland and Other Poems by T.S. Eliot.
yep, I have that book.
So, came an occasion, I had surgery. They were trying to deal with spasms that would throw my balance off the hospital, and flexor spasms in my hips and others, and in my hamstrings. And they had gone into my hamstrings and done an absolutely useless operation. I won't go into the detail of it.
Well, you just need to stretch your hamstrings some more, Chris.
That was, they did exposed and then an injection of phenyl alcohol directly in the nerves.
Ouch.
And anyway, after this surgery, I was all wrapped up in bed, and I had been through surgeries before, but something else was going on. I had headaches I just couldn't shake, and they would give me very powerful stuff to kick the headache, jam a suppository up my ass for some powerful stuff, which would make my stomach queasy, and then I would need compazine to settle that down.
It's like the side effects to the side effects to the side effects.
So I was in one of those cycles, and a nurse came in to switch me onto the other hip. Couldn't stay on one spot too long. Skin would break down.
Oh,
And I could tell this nurse, she had pushed me over, was putting something, and then she's reacting in some tremor, anxious way. And I looked over my shoulder and said, red spot or something, and she went rushing out of the room. And then came a couple seconds rushing back in with someone else. Hematoma had burst,
oh my God.
and I was bleeding out. Very, very serious. So now I have two nurses in there pushing on my leg, and they've called the surgeon. They have called the surgeon to get me on down for emergency surgery to deal with this bleed.
And was it located in the area where they had done the operation already?
Oh, yeah. something was amiss in one of those thighs, and I was losing a lot of blood. I mean, it was pretty dramatic. It was
You're lucky you lived.
so, yeah.
If they hadn't had the policy of moving you from one hip to the other, they might not have found out until you'd already
I
died.
thought I could have bled out. In fact, they were surprised I didn't go into deep shock with it. And at any rate, so they rushed me down. And on the way, I said, would you just get me the compazine? Just get me the compazine. I got that shot. But now I'm in pre-op, and I'm feeling a little better because they got the bleeding stopped.
And they're giving you saline.
And the compazine and all of this.
Right.
And they decided I had a little bit to eat for lunch. They did not want to pump my stomach. That would have been nasty.
Right.
So they were going to give me an anesthetic down into the nerve roots into my legs, and it was going to be, again, a conscious surgery. They also gave me Demerol and Valium,
Oh, boy.
and they put me on my stomach and said, you just kind of drift off. And I'm feeling pretty good. So, first of all, there was a Bill Cosby album around that time. And Bill Cosby is talking to some docs in this comedy album and saying, I don't want to hear you say oops. So I had that line for my surgeons, do not want to hear anybody saying oops. And I'm on my stomach, and the anesthesiologist tells me, just try to drift off. Let us go then, you and I, as the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of one-night stays in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Now they interrupt me. They don't let me do a clean reading of it, but I think I mumble through the rest of it.
Wow.
Streets that lead like a tedious argument of insidious intent. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. So, man, you've got to have a certain amount of poetry in your pocket, to use on special occasions. So the experience is hellish, right? But it's also, you redeem the moment.
And quite frankly, you can handle it. You've got this. You're indestructible.
I'm good in a crisis. I'm good in a crisis. So there were some years later, I came back. I just happened, some of the reason to be in the hospital, and I went up to the doc's office, and I went in there and said, if the doc is in, I'd like to say hello to him. And I gave my name, and the secretary goes, "You're the one who," apparently was a legend. So none of this stuff got into White Nine.
Right.
I mean, those experiences of I was in the hospital initially for 51 weeks, and then a semester back at school, and then back in the hospital for about 6 weeks. And it was that follow-up 6 weeks when I met Charlie and Joe. That was the summer of '60.
So were you the old pro already then?
Well, there were a couple of differences. Charlie and Joe were younger, 6, 7 years younger. They were a couple of street kids. They were both struggling with school. There was all this stuff going on. I came out of our neighborhood was Irish blue-collar neighborhood. But hell, I had gone on, scholarship student at an elite college at Wesleyan. I had gotten out into the world. I was drawn to the civil rights movement right from the beginning. Joe and Charlie were still a couple of tough, hard-ass street kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I met them that summer. Did not get to know them well, just the relationship developed, and it was 4 or 5 years later as the first Center for Independent Living by name opened in Boston, that I caught up with them again. And that evolved to, for all of us, spending our lives, our careers, doing disability rights work, and very close. And then here came Bill Martin, who was my rehab counselor, to fill out the fourth. So Bill was, as the film labeled, the catalyst. Charlie, who became commissioner of rehab in Massachusetts eventually, was the organizer. Joe was the doer, and I was the Hellenic philosopher.